Thanks for joining us for Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
All right.
Ready?
Welcome to Joost Smits.
Let's try this.
I'm glad you're willing to try it. It's awesome.
I see it now in reverse, but you see it properly, I think. But
We
you
see it
still
properly.
can't read it because it says winning elections in 12 steps to a successful election campaign. And it's by the Political Academy, and I wrote it by my colleague Frank Van Dalen.
And your name
Joost
is
Smits
right there.
My name.
Joost.
That's how you write it in Dutch, but you pronounce it as Joost.
Joost.
Which I now have committed to memory. It's written down, it's committed.
Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here. Touching on the Twilight of Democracy.
Lauren and I are both in science-based industries. Joost, you're in the science of data. I mean, there's some incredible information you're pulling. And actually, since your book is on, winning approaches, 12 ways to win elections, I wonder, was your approach to that book changed dramatically by what's happened in the U.S. in the past 8 to 10 years?
I would also say, actually, it's not to interrupt, but if anybody's read Twilight of Democracy, I would say that she's laid out a really compelling case. That author's laid out a really compelling case that actually this has been going on across Europe and a lot of other countries for a
nationalism is
longer period of time.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah, even today we had a large row in our parliament because one of the members of parliament for the most Trump-like party in our parliament, he said things that were just against our constitution, and that hasn't happened before. And what I understood is that the entire parliament walked out, but I haven't seen the fragment yet. So, I'll watch it later. What happened today? It's and that party is a bit of a problem because they don't accept fact.
Explaining a multi-party system.
Can you give us just because, Lauren, I don't think you're familiar, and I'm only like really high level familiar with the way Dutch government works, multi-party, that part of it. Can you give us a quick lowdown on that?
Yeah, I thought about that. I expected that question from you to explain what's the difference between the United States and most European countries is that we have multiple parties. And you can even start your own party. I could start a new party tomorrow or today, and it's even easy in Belgium, for example. You only need to start an association, and that association immediately can enter into elections. The only thing is you need to get votes. and
There's that.
And that's that. This distribution of votes is, of course, what the book is about. So how to get those votes for the things you stand for and how to bring that about. And then you need 12 steps which doesn't only explain the data, but also to understand the process, but also to get your message straight and to find a base of voters that think the same way as you do, because there's all these things you need to get seats in parliament. What COVID brought us is that now we have lots more parties in our parliament than we used to have. We used to have around 12, 13. And you say that's a lot, 12, 13 parties, but there's international research into parliaments all over the world. And if you have a multi-party system, it's usually the square root of the number of seats. That's the number of parties you have.
So 435 seats should be about 21 parties.
That's remarkable. A lot of people don't think about elections that way. A lot of people think about elections as you have a good message, and you try to get people to stand behind that message.
Right.
And if you do that properly, then you win the elections, and then you are you can
that's
form
the ideal,
a government.
Right?
That's the idea. But behind all this are processes that are very governed by math.
Probability.
It's like throwing dice. If you if you play a game, and you play lots of board games, I know from from Jody, you can, I see the board games in the background. The mathematics says, no, every time you throw the dice, it's the same chance.
The game of elections.
Game of elections is also governed by mathematics, that not all outcomes are as likely. So it can be, it is perfectly possible. We have 150 seats in our parliament, that there are 150 parties with each one seat in parliament. It's also very possible that there will only be one party having all 150 seats in parliament. That's possible, but it's very unlikely. It's much more likely to have the square root of the number of seats in parliament, which is around 12, 13. If you know that, this even governs the size of these parties. And what we have seen over time is that the largest parties start to shrink. And now I'm a member of a political party, which was usually the third or fourth in size. And it's still as large as it used to be. It's also in the book. It's still as large as it used to be, but all the other parties shrank to become smaller. So we still have usually 12 parties, only because of COVID. Now we had 17 parties elected in parliament, which also means that now we have a coalition of 4 parties.
Lots of parts and pieces.
That's the key, I think, is the coalition.
The coalition. And this coalition needed 4 parties to form a coalition. There were some other alternatives, but then you would need 5, 6, 7 parties in a coalition. And that's very much unworkable, because every party wants to have ministers. And the most important minister is, of course, the prime minister, which is the equal among his peers. That's the prime minister. He's not the boss. He's just the head of government.
The value of coalition building.
Yeah, so the coalition thing is what's entirely different. In order to govern, the different parties have to create agreements with each other, almost memorandums of understanding. And then they form together so that they have a big enough power base to be the government, which is radically different from the two-party system we have in the US, because it's always us, them. There's like no coalition building. So
in the US, it ends up being us versus them.
Because as soon as one candidate has more than 50%, that candidate does not have to listen to any other group.
Well, I disagree, because we have seen from the breakdown of government that there does have to be collaboration and a willingness to work across the aisles. But the two-party system itself has made that aisle such a huge divide that people just are bullheaded. And it's like, you can't have sensibilities that relate to the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate, because then you're a traitor. You just, and it's become so separated.
Sometimes there's a third-party candidate.
If you are in the United States, and let's say you start a new party. You start a new party tomorrow. It's the Lauren and Jody party. And you're for all the good things. That's all good things. You're very democratic, and you want to advance the United States into the future with more climate awareness and more equal rights and more equal treatment and everything.
Everything.
It's great party. But you still will not get any seats or any position because of the system that you have. Whereas in the Netherlands, if you start a party in our country and you acquire, let's say, enough people behind you, you get to get two seats in parliament. You still may become one of the important members of a coalition. Which also means that in research it has shown that voters that do not see any result of their vote, they will not vote for that party anymore.
Exactly.
So they may vote for you once, and then they find out, well, you completely disappeared. You have no influence at all. You did not get any seats. You didn't get any position. Next time, they will say, well, thank you. It was a very good effort. We appreciate it a lot, but we will not vote for you again. We will vote again for the Republican or Democrat wing or candidate that is most close to what you want to bring about. But in the Netherlands, people are often they see that their vote for this very small party still has an effect. And that's why they will keep on voting for small parties.
All of this is a good thing.
That's a good thing. It's a good thing because if you have all of these parties, many more people get exactly or more or less exactly what they wanted.
Yeah, and it's real representation, and it also, I'm going to be, I always go to the theory of learning from nature, and nature doesn't have two answers. It has a million answers, and some of the answers are there in a situation, and some of the answers are there in another situation. But limiting the pool is genetically bad and naturally bad and resilience bad, and I mean, you've got a lot of bad associated with a two-party system.
Keeping the cost below 1 million.
You started by being like a data analytics and recommendation to different parties as to how they could spend their money, in what way to reach the voters that they needed to reach.
And not only money, because a campaign consists of money and of people. And what you have a base of people that are volunteers. Yeah. Because it's all in the Netherlands, the budget for an election campaign is very often below 1 million for the entire country, which is
also awesome.
Yeah,
there's no comparison with your country, and the amount of money does not always determine who gets the most votes, which is also very important.
Very different.
And different from your country. They have to think about how to spend their money, but also to where to send their volunteers at the right time. Because otherwise, you spend a lot of money and people on the wrong on things that do not bring as much effect for. And that's what the book helps you to do.
Working for all parties.
Because there are no high budgets in our country, it's why I work for all parties. It brings you so much worth in your life if you have to work for people who are very determined and they have the best arguments for themselves to do the things they do.
Yeah.
And your opinion doesn't really matter one bit. It's not interesting.
You're doing the process for them to achieve their goals.
And also hope that they win.
Let's learn about Joost the politician.
You've been involved in I don't know if it's political, but in councils for the city of Rotterdam, right? Yeah. You were in the city council?
It was the council of a borough. Okay. They used to divide Rotterdam and Amsterdam into boroughs to make it more democratic. But I've been involved in a borough council, and I did mostly on social affairs. And
that's
because, great. It was just because there we had our own mandate. It was all about power, of course.
All about you seeking power, or all about power of making the mandates happen?
If you are just there in a borough council, you only talk about things that are thrown out by the next level. It is not very worthwhile to fill your life with such. And on social affairs, they had their own mandate. So everything we decided was also implemented. My background is public administration. So what I like is policy.
You're right.
So it's not about my character. It's more about I like to make the world better, to change things. That's how I got into politics, because I wanted to change things, and I saw that the things they were doing were not as good as they could have been.
Could be,
at least in my perspective. In our council, there was a lot of people were not getting along very well, let's say. And we went through a lot of the aldermen. So finally, they asked me if I didn't want to become an alderman. I was on holiday. And I said, sure, I will. No, that was not the best time of my life. No.
Did they chew you up and spit you out?
I was going to say, why? Why was it not?
No, you always think you're in a council, and you can decide with the other council members on topics brought about by the alderman and the local mayor. so the local cabinet, let's say. But once you're in there, you're in that position, you find out again, there's this council that also wants to have its say. You have your colleagues who are of different parties, because it's a coalition also. So they are from different parties, and they also and you have your own party and you have the civil servants. And the civil servants, you cannot just tell them what to do, because they need a plan. They need to plan ahead. And if they're working on something that you also wanted, and they need time to make that happen, and it will take them, let's say, 4 months. Well, during that time, you cannot tell them to do something else, because they're busy.
Lots of pretty buttons.
If you're a local administrator, there's a big box with all kinds of buttons you can turn. The buttons are there, but your hands are tied behind your back. You cannot touch the buttons. Everybody who has the chance to become the local administrator or council person to do that, because it's fascinating. It also enriches your life and also your experience, because you can always blame the city council or the alderman or the mayor for anything, everything. You can do that. But it's so helpful to have been in that position, to have seen it from the other side of the window.
Qualifications?
Isn't that true for just about everything?
Yes, but for most things you need to have some kind of qualification. And and this really, I'm not sure about the United States, but I think also in your country, anybody can become a councilman.
Yeah. Again, I think, and this is a foolishly general statement on my part, there's too much money in politics at every level in the United States. Too much money. It tends to be people who are wealthier, who are in a position to run for any position. There are always exceptions, but I think the system leans in that direction pretty heavily. Do you agree, Lauren?
I agree.
Permanent campaign.
And the other part of politics in Europe, I'll say, that I like is that you have a limited window of campaigning, a limited window, and you also have restrictions on money. So, but those two things don't exist here. There are elections. The campaigning starts a month after a president is elected. They're making decisions based on how their campaign schedule needs to look, and it really undermines doing actual deep, sustained work when all you're doing is trying to stay in the seat.
Well, our last book,
I love this.
It was called Permanent Campaign.
Oh,
it was that's what starts after the elections.
Yeah.
But we wrote this in 2014 just because of that, because of there's not a lot of money. It doesn't revolve around money. There are also lots of people that just have the best intentions, but have no clue on what they're doing. And because they have no clue, it can also end up in tears, that they are dismissed by the voter after 4 years. It may be the best way is somewhere in the middle. More money, but not too much. And more qualification, but not too much.
Not true in the USA.
I always tell my wife, if there's one country I wouldn't want to live in, it's the United States, because it's so different from the rest of the world. In also the way of life, and we imported lots of things from the United States in Europe over the let's say the period between the 1950s and 1990s. But now it's European culture, which is more prominent, I think, in the world, and also with democratic reforms. Other countries, new democracies that choose their system, most of them choose the multi-party system and not the system the United States has. And research in the Netherlands, he goes by the pen name Qualifications. He says the outcome of every election is a representation of what the voters wanted. And in the United States, that's not true. And it would have been very hard for me to vote.
Social nets for societal benefit.
When you said before the differences between living in the United States and living in basically a European country, could be any, beyond just the election, what are some of the other considerations that led you to that statement?
Also, the social, let's say, the social. If you are poor in the United States, you can be really dirt poor without any health care. It's improving now, but you could have been until recently to be very poor just on your own without any help. Nobody is there for you. Whereas in Europe, and it costs us a lot of money, it is expensive, but there's help for anybody that you don't live out on the street, and you will always have healthcare, and you will always have a roof over your head, and you will always have a good school to go to.
Exactly. Even higher education, which is something that the US has almost turned its back on.
We do not have people as wealthy as they are in your country. And I think that's a good thing.
I think the social nets and the understanding of social community as being a necessity for the community as a whole to succeed, that's something that's a common thought in Europe. And in the US, as soon as you start to talk about social nets, all people hear is socialism and communism. And it's very interesting because it becomes a defensive discussion with many people. I would say that we're very lucky in New York. Both Lauren and I are in New York State. And I think that New York State does very well, comparatively well, regarding higher education support, comparatively well in some other aspects. But we still have pockets of people that are so independent, they're killing themselves in the process.
Not a bad person.
Yeah, but also because we have this coalition system, it means that your neighbor can be of another party, but he's not a bad person.
Right.
And your
awesome.
neighbor at the other side of the street may be of a party that's opposite to yours, but still in your own municipality there may be a coalition with that party, because at some point they found common ground.
What that brings up to me is that the structure of the government has created a need for collaboration and coalition building. And that attitude, that approach is something that therefore is throughout the social structure of the country as well. I don't know which came first, but they're mutually supportive.
But I'm not sure if something came first. I think in your country it has grown to become like this. And now it has to grow beyond that, back to more or less what it was, that your neighbor may have a completely different opinion, but together you make your street safe.
Must learn Dutch.
So one last question about the book. One, is it translated into English and available to us? Two, would it be applicable at all to the United States, given the differences?
Yeah, that's why I was also a bit surprised, because it's very much a Dutch book. It doesn't even apply to Belgium or to Luxembourg or to Germany. It's very much a Dutch book for the Dutch situation. But what I do, I publish in English regularly science papers about the background, about how this works, the mechanism. And these papers I publish are always, most of the time they're also peer-reviewed by other political scientists, which come from the Netherlands or from Belgium, who also are familiar with the background of it.
Asimov and Predictions.
You have actually been instrumental in predicting election results, right?
Yep.
And what is your success rate based on your data and research?
When I started this, I was very impressed with Asimov's Foundation original trilogy. I read that in high school, and I thought, well, that would be great if you can predict the future. So when I had the chance, and I got this first chance in 2013, when a local newspaper, they asked, can you predict the outcome of the next election, which will be in March? So it was September, they asked for
When you were
March.
13?
No. In 2013,
oh, good.
they
Okay.
asked me to predict the 2014 outcome for the municipal election in Rotterdam. And I used my techniques to predict who would win, and that party became also the largest. But then they asked me again in 2015 for the election in 2018, which would be 2.5 years later. And then I really did my thing. I used gravitation theory from a Dutch Nobel Prize winner, economist, and he used this theory to predict economic outcome, and I used that theory to predict election outcome. And I predicted 10 to 12 seats in local in the municipal council for this party, and they got 11. So it was right in the middle, 2.5 years before.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, it is also very stressful because you see them acting and doing things that they shouldn't do, saying things they shouldn't say. So, well, because it all still depends on the voters.
Clues.
You help any party. And so what you've done is you've put these clues into a book. And it's not only that any party can access them, but any voter can access them and learn about what they're responding to and what is influencing them, and what the approaches are by the political parties, which I think is a transparency that we also don't have in the US. So all we do in the US is like, there's marketing campaigns and there's people getting duped by them and there's other people blaming the marketing campaigns. There's very little transparency. It's just, throwing water balloons across fences at each other.
Yeah, but this book also, it's not just that. It's not just explaining, but it also is about more or less of a manual. Let's say you are a voter and you're not happy. And you say, I want to do something about that in the Netherlands. How you could get a party, your own party, to get votes and seats and change the things you want to change.
Joost is ready to tell us his heroes.
Is there somebody who's a hero to you that we could all learn from?
I expected that question because what I've seen from the other videos, you always ask that question. I prepared that. If you go back to what really changed if you start research, you always have some conception or some idea of your field of work. There's also always something that you say, well, I'm going to research it, but I think it's this. It's more or less this complex of ideas. This is what I'm doing. And there are some people that changed that. And the first person that I should mention is a Catalan priest. He lived in the 13th century. His name was Ramon Llull, and in Barcelona there's lots of buildings, also universities named after him. But he wrote a novel in the 13th century, and in that novel, it's very strange to us now. It's called Blanquerna. Blanquerna is a guy who's in love with a woman, Natana. But to celebrate their love, they both go into a monastery. We can't understand that. So they go into a convent, and Natana, one day, her abbess, she dies. And they have to choose for a new abbess. And if you think about elections, the first elections were held in churches to vote for a pope, to vote for all kinds of church
leadership in the church.
And they had to vote for an abbess, and she is the first in that novel. But Natana, so it's a female voice by a Roman Catholic priest. He wrote the book, but she's the first. He says, well, of course we have to vote for the abbess, but I heard of a new way to do this. And that was also the first time in history that anybody said, well, what? No way to do this. And this Blanquerna, this novel was lost for quite some time. that's been found again. And then somebody discovered this is the full description of a preference voting, which is something we do not do in the Netherlands. You do not do that in the United States. It's all about preference. So you do not just vote for one person, you rank them. You rank them.
The New York City mayor's election just did it sort of that way, did it not?
I don't know.
I think so.
This Natana is the first voice. It's a female voice, and she wrote about that. And the second person that's my hero is Gary King, because one of the things I do, you have all these election results for boroughs, for large ranges of voters. There are 1,000 voters in one election for one voting station, and I have to break that up into streets and zip codes. And if you go into statistics, especially in the United States, there's a lot of literature against that, because they say you cannot do that, because if you break up aggregated data into little bits, you can wind up with very wrong conclusions. And there have been lots of examples about that, especially in the United States, of how that can go really wrong, especially with your population of black and white citizens and voters. And all the Dutch, if you go to a school in the Netherlands, you always learn you shouldn't break up aggregated data because that's wrong. That's called ecological fallacy. But that doesn't help me, of course, because I have to break up these data. So there's Gary King. He's a Harvard professor, and he, in 1997, he wrote a book on a solution to the ecological inference problem. And that's a magic book. That's a magic book.
It's a magic book.
That's a magic book. He wrote a magic book. And the third person I should mention is someone who's in my field of research. She's Belgian. She's now at the University of Montreal. Ruth Dassonville. She's Flemish speaking, French speaking, but she's now in Canada. And she is all about the aligned voters and change and stability in voting behavior. And she's the most prominent research in that field for Belgium and the Netherlands, and also in Canada, apparently.
Great.
And she's a real hero to me.
And I must say, this is a fantastic focus.
Excellent. Very cool.
So then our next question that's coming, which is, if we all stopped right now and collectively focused on one initiative to improve the world, what is your initiative that you would propose?
Well, one thing that I've been working on for the last 2 years, but COVID got a bit in the way of that, is to implement my research for election and electoral voting on the climate transition, the energy transition. And what's important about that is that if you say, well, we all have to go through an energy transition, we have to make new choices for the future. You cannot stick with the things you've been doing, you have to do something else. If you just tell people to do that, lots of people will say no.
Yes.
Because they see that world changing. The things they value, the things they hold dear, they cannot exist anymore, or they have to be changed, and they're reluctant, to make that change. But with my research, what I've shown is that if you can find out what people are willing to do, you can extend on that. And that's and Jody helped me at that time, and she said she had the perfect title for that research, the paper that I supplied to the province, and she said, well, if you take the first step, it helps you to see the next step, and that's what the essence is of the energy transition, I think. So
I love that, and I'm so glad that phrase or that concept touched you in some way, and you were able to relate it to the work that you were doing, because
it was the thing I was doing already. But you only summarize it into one sentence, because it means that if you are, for example, Republican or Democrat or just citizens of the United States or of the Netherlands or of Belgium, you're not forced to do something against your will. You're just helped to make the next step decision, because it's something you would have been willing to do anyway, but somebody told you, well, try this, and you may be more willing to do that.
That's fantastic.
And not resist, because resisting the transition that we all have to do, that's not a solution.
That's fantastic, Joost. I really appreciate that. Yeah,
It's so
I do.
exciting to know that people do this kind of work. It's so outside of my, like, I don't do this kind of work. So it's so exciting to know.
Yeah, but in my country, most citizens already must have had at least one letter or brochure or flyer or a conversation at the door with somebody because they were sent by me. So you may not know what other people, colleagues of mine in your country already
Total
did to
power.
No, it's not total. No, because it's still up to the citizen.
No,
It's not
I'm
like
teasing
Cambridge
you.
Analytica. We're not
Oh, no.
trying to force people against their will. We're just helping them to make the decision.
Yeah, no. I was mostly teasing you that you have you not directly, but you secondarily or tertiary, you touch so many people with the knowledge you have.
Yeah, but that's not power.
That's powerful.
It's communication. It's just communication.
Thanks for joining us at Subject to Change.
So we can't chat more because I really have enjoyed it tremendously.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm still talking Martin into it, but the Netherlands is on the docket for 2022. We just don't know exactly when.
No, it also depends on COVID and travel
I know.
restrictions, and we don't know how this year will go. In the near future, of course, we will again be visiting the United States. I would love to meet Lauren also in person.
I'll come to Albany.
Okay, well, you're in Syracuse, I heard.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, and last time we were in the United States, we passed Syracuse.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted to say.
True. This was awesome.
Thank you, Joost.
Okay.
Yes. All right.
And say hi to the family.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.